In a competitive world, average won't cut it. The Success Launch Point shows you how to stand out, deliver massive value, and rise above the crowd. With on-demand courses, expert coaching, and a community focused on growth, you'll accelerate your career and your paycheck. It's time to level up. Check out modernobserver.com/launchpoint.
Hamas releases the living hostages. New tariffs for China. Government layoffs begin, and more. Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and here's the news you need to know. After more than 2 years, all of the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages held in Gaza were released by Hamas on Monday morning, Israel's press office announced. The release comes after Hamas agreed to the terms of a ceasefire in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Israeli officials say Hamas retains the 28 bodies of hostages who were killed in captivity or during the October 7th attack. President Donald Trump flew to Israel to mark the historic ceasefire with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli President Isaac Herzog, and other leaders. This followed Palestinians returning to northern Gaza as Israeli troops withdrew. As part of the ceasefire, Israel pulled its troops back from part of Gaza on Friday, though it still controls about 50% of the territory. That prompted tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians to begin returning to northern Gaza, which has been devastated by Israeli airstrikes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged President Trump over the phone Saturday to broker a peace deal in Ukraine following the Gaza ceasefire agreement. If a war can be stopped in one region, then surely other wars can be stopped as well, including the Russian war, Zelensky wrote on X. Trump says he is considering supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine if Putin does not resume peace talks. President Trump said Friday the United States would impose a new tariff of 100% on imports from China over and above any tariff that they are currently paying, starting on November 1st. The action was in retaliation for new export controls that China imposed this week on its strategically valuable rare earth minerals. Trump also said that the U.S. would impose export controls on any and all critical software and threatened to cancel his upcoming meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping because of the dispute. For its part, China slapped new port fees on U.S. ships and started an antitrust investigation into Qualcomm. The Dow Jones Index dropped almost 900 points on Friday as the dispute widened. On Truth Social, Trump posted that there was no way China should be allowed to hold the world captive with its rare earths policies. Venezuelan opposition leader and newly minted Nobel Peace Prize winner María Corina Machado dedicated the award on Friday to both President Donald Trump and the suffering people of Venezuela. Machado, a leading figure in the resistance against Venezuela's ruling party, took to X to acknowledge the horror and to praise Trump for his support. This recognition of the struggle of all Venezuelans is a boost to conclude our task, to conquer freedom. Machado said, "We are on the threshold of victory, and today, more than ever, we count on President Trump, the people of the United States, the peoples of Latin America, and the democratic nations of the world as our principal allies to achieve freedom and democracy." The Trump administration begins mass layoffs as the government shutdown drags on. Making good on threats issued before the government shutdown began on October 1st, the Trump administration sent layoff notices to thousands of federal government employees Friday. The Trump administration laid off more than 4,100 federal employees, with more layoffs to come, according to administration officials. The most significant layoffs took place at the Treasury Department, with 1,446 employees receiving reduction in force notices. The Department of Health and Human Services also saw major cutbacks, with roughly 1,100 to 1,200 employees affected. The layoffs spanned 5 other federal departments, 315 workers in the Commerce Department, 466 in the Education Department, 187 in the Energy Department, 442 in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and 176 in the Department of Homeland Security. Despite the government shutdown, troops will receive their regularly scheduled wages on October 15th, President Trump announced on Saturday. The Pentagon will shift approximately $8 billion in funding for military research to pay salaries. The United Nations Human Rights Council sparked outrage last week when it announced that 2 of the 7 experts elected to its advisory committee were from Iran and China. Hillel Neuer, executive director of UN Watch, told Fox News Digital, the UN elected Beijing's and Tehran's loyal agents as human rights experts, without a ballot, without shame. These regimes persecute minorities, jail anyone who speaks freely, and rule through fear and censorship. Neuer added, the committee that once drafted the UN's Anti-Racism Convention has now been captured by those who embody racism, repression, and the silencing of truth. It's an inversion of human rights and a stain on the United Nations itself. President Emmanuel Macron has asked Sébastien Lecornu to return as French Prime Minister only 4 days after he stood down from the post, sparking a week of high drama and political turmoil. Macron made the announcement late on Friday, hours after meeting all the main parties together at the Élysée Palace, except the leaders of the far right and far left. Lecornu's return came as a surprise, as he said on national TV only 2 days prior he was not chasing the job, and his mission is over. It is not even certain he will be able to form a government, but he will have to hit the ground running. The new prime minister faces a deadline on Monday to put next year's budget before Parliament. Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton, celebrated for her quirky charm and iconic roles in Annie Hall, The Godfather films, and Father of the Bride, has died at 79. Keaton made her film debut in the 1970s Lovers and Other Strangers, but her breakthrough came as Kay Adams in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather in 1972. She later admitted she never read Mario Puzo's novel before auditioning. Her numerous collaborations with filmmakers Woody Allen and Nancy Meyers introduced her to new audiences and generations of moviegoers, earning praise for both her acting and her trend-setting fashion sense. Keaton, who had not been seen publicly in 6 months and never disclosed any illness, leaves behind her 2 children, Dexter and Duke. That's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch every episode of the Raw Naked Truth Daily News Brief, as well as our sister podcast, Carnivore Radio, with news analysis and commentary, and the rest of the Xvadio Podcast Network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.